My name is Katie Ryder, and I am the National Program Coordinator for Jews for a Secular Democracy. I want to welcome everybody. I also want to open tonight with an acknowledgement that I know many of us are here with heavy hearts. I'm glad you're all here, though, and I hope that by the time this program is over, you'll be glad you came as well. Even as we remain heartbroken about what is happening, we also have important work to do here at home. So thank you for coming, and let's get started. First and foremost, I want to thank all the members of the Florida Jewish Women and Religious Freedom Steering Committee for their immense help in planning this event. There's quite a number, so you can find their names on our website at www.jfasd.org/Florida. I also want to acknowledge and sincerely thank Herizon for their grant support for this project. It could not have happened without their help. In addition, I'd like to thank all of our co-sponsors for tonight's webinar, including the Society for Humanistic Judaism, the National Council of Jewish Women Greater Miami Section, Congregation Beth Adam, Temple Israel of Orlando, Florida Freedom to Read Project, League of Women Voters of Florida, Florida National Organization for Women, the Greater Orlando National Organization for Women, Jewish Community Relations Council of Broward County, Keshet, and RAC-Florida. In fact, to introduce our moderator and panelists for tonight's event, please welcome Steering Committee member extraordinaire, Michele Eiger, who is a passionate community organizer whose North Star is to bring about social equity while driving change with coalition partners, legislative and policy reforms, and empowerment for the underserved and minority populations. She is the state organizer for RAC-Florida, the Florida-based affiliate of the Religious Action Center, the social justice arm of the Union of Reform Judaism. In this role, she is organizing over 58 communities across Florida to help put reproductive freedom in the hands of voters in Florida. Michele.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. I would like to introduce our moderators and speakers. And tonight I'll start with Senator Nan Rich. Our moderator, Vice Mayor of Broward County and former State Senator Nan Rich was first elected as Broward County Commissioner, District 1 in 2016. She was recently selected by her colleagues on the County Commission to be the Vice Mayor of Broward County. Prior to her service on the County Commission, Nan Rich was elected to the State Senate in 2004 after serving 2 terms in the Florida House of Representatives. She was the first woman to be elected Senate Democratic leader, a position that she held from 2010 until she was term limited in November of 2012. Her community involvement includes years of advocacy and activism on behalf of women, children, and families, including serving as the national president of the National Council of Jewish Women and a member of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum Council in Washington, D.C. Among her long list of awards and honors, Senator Rich has been inducted into the Broward County Women's Hall of Fame, the Broward County Senior Hall of Fame, and the Miami Beach High School Hall of Fame. A longtime Florida resident, Nan attended the University of Florida, and she and her husband, David, have 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Our next panelist is State Senator Lauren Book, who is the Democratic leader of the Florida State Senate, an internationally respected child safety expert, and former classroom teacher who fights every day for Florida's families. Senator Book has represented Western Broward County in the Florida Senate since 2016. Following her advocacy in the wake of the Parkland massacre, Senator Book was appointed to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Public Safety Commission to investigate mass shootings and recommend policy. She also serves as a member of the Florida Children and Youth Cabinet, as well as on the board of directors for the statewide Council on Human Trafficking direct support organization, and has fought for a multi-year battle, resulting finally in successful passage of legislation to support survivors and to stop trafficking. In her capacity as founder and CEO of the Florida-based nonprofit Lauren's Kids, Senator Book works tirelessly to prevent child sexual abuse and to help survivors heal. One of the 42 million survivors of child sexual abuse living in the US today, her Safer, Smarter Schools curriculum is being used in classrooms across the country and the world. She has been named a Glamour Woman of the Year, People All-Star Among Us, L'Oreal Woman of Worth, and is the recipient of a Congressional Medal of Merit for her tireless work to protect childhood. She is also a 4-time Emmy Award-winning television producer and a 2-time Publisher Weekly best-selling author. Senator Book most enjoys spending time with her family, her husband Blair Brines, and her 2 children, Kennedy Grace and Hudson Lee. Our third panelist, Dr. Cori Baill, earned her medical degree from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, and then completed her residency training in gynecology and obstetrics at the Johns Hopkins Medical Center in Baltimore, Maryland. She then served for 3 years in the U.S. Public Health Service, achieving the rank of Lieutenant Commander, and in July of 1990 was awarded the United States Public Health Service Achievement Medal. Dr. Baill is the founder of the Menopause Center in Orlando, Florida, where she served as medical director for 12 years. During her medical career of over 30 years, she has been affiliated with Planned Parenthood. She was a former medical director of numerous Planned Parenthood affiliates and has served on its National Medical Committee for 6 years. She currently also is an abortion provider in the state of Florida. She also currently is a professor at UCF College of Medicine, where she teaches 1st and 2nd year medical students. She has an interest in menopausal medicine, narrative medicine, and medical education. She is also the author of Why Is Mommy Crying? Explaining Early Pregnancy Loss to Young Children, a non-denominational inclusive children's picture book to help explain miscarriage to those children as young as 3. Rabbi Rachael Jackson began her tenure in 2023 with the Congregation of Reformed Judaism, or CRJ, in Orlando, Florida, and is the first female senior rabbi in Orlando, Florida. She was ordained from HUC-JIR in 2015 and came to the rabbinate after a decade as an analytical chemist. Rabbi Jackson is eager to share her passion for teaching, learning, pastoral care, and social justice. Bringing relevancy and relationships to Judaism is a crucial part of her rabbinate, as is her desire to seamlessly meld Judaism and modernity. Welcome, all of you. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Katie.
Hi, we are still having a bit of an issue, but the senator, as you can all see, is calling in.
Okay, let's get started with Rabbi Jackson. Okay, welcome, Rabbi Jackson. What I was saying to you before, which you didn't hear, is that I also belong to a synagogue who has its first female rabbi, Temple George Orim in West End, Rabbi Marcy Block. So anyway, welcome. Thank you. So the first question I have for you has to deal with the Jewish perspective of what is really religious freedom, and how are we and why are reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, and public education, for instance, considered religious freedom issues?
Thank you. That's a really important question, and I feel honored to sort of kick that off. To me, the sort of answer to the biggest question is that religious freedom means that each group of religious or non-religious peoples have the freedom to engage in the secular and the government-run systems without worry that their personal beliefs will be forbidden or crushed, or as this one says, trampled on. In a country with this belief of separation of church and state, laws should not favor one religious view over another, and instead leave that to the individual or their religious institution if that is their preference. The laws that do not allow for the expression or action of a person's belief therefore go against this very tenet of our country. We do, of course, have laws that prevent serious crimes committed against others and don't celebrate those laws being broken in the name of religion, right? I mean, when we talk about these things, we want to make sure that we're not talking in extremes either. So there are a number of things that fall into this religious freedom category, not the least the ones that you spoke about. And I think I'll go into this a little bit more in just a moment, but reproductive issues for me are very much a religious freedom issue, because I don't believe it's up to the government to decide what happens with the person's body in any way. And it's up to the person and those who support them. And we need only look at something else that our government sort of aids in or helps in when we look at organ donation. A person says, yes, I choose or I don't choose, and no one steps in, even though we know that there are record numbers of people on our organ donation wait list. The government doesn't step in and said, well, you're healthy enough and we need them. I don't believe that. I think reproductive rights fall in that same sort of category of personal autonomy. And the same thing for me is true for LGBTQAI folks. The government should not get to decide what happens with appropriate health care based on a religious understanding of sexuality and of gender. And the third one that you asked was public education. And this sounds a little bit perhaps very firm, but I don't believe that religion has a place in a classroom. I believe that cultural studies, cultural experiences, and dialogue, yes, but ideological and religious teachings, or lack thereof, do not belong in the classroom.
I think there are a lot of people that would agree with you on that. Especially two of us who have been Democratic leaders in the Florida Senate, Martin Book and myself. That's been a perennial battle, as you know, in Florida. There are many people on this call that are not from Florida, but other states are having encroachments as well. So what does Judaism say? What does it teach us about why we should be engaged in these issues?
Yeah, I mean, oh, you're giving me the tough ones to start. I mean, I'm sure everyone else gets them too.
You're the rabbi on here.
That's right. That's right. So I want to preface my statement by saying that when we ask the question, what does Judaism say about X, Y, or Z? We can really only answer that with a broad brushstroke. There are nuances within the streams of Judaism, between streams, and of course, from one individual to another individual. So I'm going to do my best to answer in a broad way, but I also know that there will be Jews who agree and disagree with some of the points that I'm making. Also, what we're talking about here tonight are very large topics with so many shades of differentiation. And given our time constraints and the breadth of this conversation, I'm just going to barely touch on that intricacies. So with all that being said, I did want to start with the LGBTQAI people and recognize that from the time of the Mishnah, which was over 1800 years ago when it was written down, there was an understanding of multiple genders and sexualities. And they wrote a lot about it because they recognize that it exists. So some of you might have heard about the 6 genders that are written in the Mishnah. Again, this is almost 2,000 years ago when they recognized 6 different genders. Unfortunately, the passage of time has made those teachings be forgotten until recently. In non-halakhically binding streams of Judaism, which is pretty much anything not orthodox. But I want to be careful with that language. people across the gender spectrum are full members of congregation, full members of the community as a whole. There is no question of not just tolerance, but true integration appreciation. And the same thing is true for a spectrum of sexuality. But I also want to be honest and say that these understandings are fairly recent and they're not yet fully widespread and are something that we as Jews need to take a look at ourselves and what we have done and the harm that we've caused to say, okay, we have gotten here now. How can we repair that we should have been here much sooner? And then also, to be fair, since you asked, what does Judaism say? In halakhically bound Judaism, anything other than cisgender and heterosexual is not tolerated or spoken about. And those of us who fully support all expressions of humanness hope that our co-religionists will come to agree sooner than later. Which sort of brings up another point to the question that your first question to me, where religion gets to dictate public sphere or the laws. We have to ask what stream or what denomination or offshoot actually gets to make the call within the same religion itself. So even if we were to say, oh, the Jews get to decide, which Jews? And if we say, okay, the Baptists, which Baptists, et cetera, and at what point in history are they choosing? As we know in Judaism, we look a lot different now than we did, 50 years ago, where you wouldn't have had a woman rabbi here at all. So we have to even be very careful about that piece. And so just going to the bodily autonomy question, which is how I hear reproductive rights. I take it a much bigger than only about, say, ovaries and uteruses. It's really about body autonomy. But in terms of reproduction, Judaism believes that the person carrying the fetus takes priority over the fetus itself. And this allows, now again, this allowability isn't as rigid as it was with LGBTQAI, but there are a variety of answers. But overall, life and health of the person carrying the fetus supersedes any other beliefs. And there's even a belief that up until 40 days, it is like it is water, which we sort of recognize as that 6-7 week mark of, do you even know you're pregnant? And at that point, our tradition says, it's like water. It doesn't even mean anything. And there's arguments in the Torah where it says this man and this man were fighting and one of them accidentally pushed that person and his wife miscarried. And what do you have to owe? And they said, oh, well, you just have to pay her financially for the damages, but it's not the same thing as a life. And so a lot of our text goes back to that piece when we say, well, where are you coming up with this? It goes all the way back to those points of Torah. And then your final question, right? Your final question there was, why should we care? Right? Like, why should we care? And I think that is part of my job as a rabbi, is to help people care. I think it's our obligation to know what our tradition says. And we are also accustomed as Jews to being secondary citizens or non-citizens in the countries that we live in, especially pre-modernity. And so we have to abide by the laws of the country, even if they conflict with our own beliefs. And so here in our country, where we get to have a say in the laws themselves as citizens, it is definitely upon us to make sure that we are having the laws that work not only for our religion, but across the spectrum. So I hope in that sort of breath, I was able to answer.
Well, you gave us a lot of food for thought. And I want to just respond by saying I had pulled out a letter to the editor that I had written in 1992. Okay. And it was in response to someone whose Jewish arguments about abortion rights I disagreed, and all of you would disagree with as well. And one of the things that's interesting, I was quoting from a Rabbi David Feldman, who wrote a book, Marital Relations, Birth Control, and Abortion in Jewish Law. And what you've just quoted is what he had which I repeated in the text in Exodus 21:22 provides, if men strive and wound a pregnant woman so that her fruit be expelled, but no harm befall her, then shall he be fined as her husband shall assess, and the matter placed before the judges. But if harm befall her, then thou shalt give life for life. So it's pretty much what you were saying. Yeah. Well, thank you really for those wonderful comments.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we're moving on now to my dear friend, Senator Book. And she has a much harder job in Tallahassee than I had when I was there as the Democratic leader. But she's speaking out on behalf of all of us, and certainly in recognition of the social justice. I look at the Florida Religious Action Center, the social justice issues that we all care so much about, and which we're taught to observe. So from your perspective, how does what is happening in Florida tie into religious freedom and the First Amendment?
Well, first of all, thank you. And I am so thankful every day that you are my mentor, Senator Rich, Leader Rich, because I don't think I could do this job without your tutelage and your support. It has certainly been a rough time here in Tallahassee. And to your question, following the rabbi is very hard, by the way. Doctor, you're going to have a much easier job. So listen, I think that when you think about what's happening in Florida, overall, and how that ties into religious freedoms and the First Amendment, it's a really, really scary time. I mean, I don't know how many of you have opened up a newspaper in the last 6 months or a year and read about seeing books being banned, neo-Nazis on a bridge in Orlando. The tone and tenor here is really terrible. And when you talk about, First Amendment rights, it's good for me, but not for thee, right? Like, I think that you have this really odd dichotomy of, and to the rabbi's point, where does your religion stop and your rights to your religion and mine, and who is creating those within policy? And I think we should all agree that everybody should be respected, but religion shouldn't necessarily drive public policy. And we should all have the right to decide what happens to our body. And what has happened here with this abortion ban certainly is the government trampling on our right to privacy. And I know, and I hope that we'll hear from the doctor on this. We've always had a special protection in our Constitution to privacy. That is what is up before the Supreme Court right now, which, if anyone takes away anything, I'm sure they're going to take something from the rabbi and something from the doctor. From me, every Thursday at 11 o'clock, go check the Supreme Court website. I do it every Thursday because a decision is imminent from the Supreme Court, which I hope doesn't uphold the 15-week ban. But if it does, we're on a different path. And I think that we are in a very different, scary place. How does this, play into all of those things? Obviously, we have our First Amendment right to speak out and to have freedom of speech. Certainly, that doesn't seem to exist in the state of Florida. I think it plays into, certainly the right and how they choose to govern. Senator Polsky and Senator Berman and I argued on the floor and used many of the arguments that the rabbi discussed. Why isn't our religious beliefs matter? Why should we not have a carve out within the abortion ban? Quite frankly, if our religion dictates that the woman's health, welfare, mental health comes before all things, should we not have a religious exemption the same way that you have a religious exemption for a vaccine? Certainly that's the case. It's okay for you over here when we're talking about COVID or anything else. They said, no, not here, not when it comes to life. I think that you have a group of people in power who are a monolith, really, and believe in some kind of way. and anyone who doesn't believe the way that they believe, we're going to shut you out. You see that time and time again. You see it with the Parental Bill of Rights. You see, on the one hand, we should have our right to parent the way we want to parent, unless you have a child who's trans, or unless you have a child who is gay. You're not allowed to parent the way that we would want you to parent. It's the hypocrisy of it all is deplorable, certainly easy to call out. But the reality is destroying lives. And I think I'm sure that the rabbi will speak to this, and I know that the rabbi as well. We know that the things that have happened since the 15-week ban has come into place is not hyperbole. Women are dying. Women have been sent to their cars to sit in a car. Think about this. In the world that we're living in today, women like myself who sought IVF treatments to have much wanted pregnancies, who suffer major complications. This is in Broward County, Florida, pre-prom. And maybe the doctor can talk about what that is, because I certainly am not a doctor. But when there's a tear in your amniotic sac and the pregnancy is no longer viable, but there's not imminent risk to the woman, in Broward County, Florida, women are sent to sit in their car with no air conditioning on so their temperature can go up, so you could go back and get treated for sepsis to receive appropriate health care. That is where we are today. That is happening in Broward County. It is not hyperbole. And we shouldn't be living in times as these, but we are. And I know we're going to talk about where there is hope, and I know we're going to get to that. But where does all of this tie in? This ties into the right using their religion, using their beliefs to push policy that put women, that put people down, that oppresses people, that takes away their voice. Make no mistake, this has been time and time and time again. First, they took their books. Where have we heard this before? This is
they burned their
out
books.
of the playbook. And so we are in that time, and I know that we have ways to fight back. And certainly in today's climate, with everything going on the way that it is, we must continue to stick together to fight for these things, because there is a decision coming down that is going to make things cataclysmically worse for women and girls throughout the state. I hope I answered that.
Yes, you did. You actually kind of hit on a number of the so that's like an echo right now, I think. So let me ask you about the privacy amendment, because it moves into the discussion of the ballot initiative and so forth, which we're going to be talking more about. But I don't know how many people who on the call actually listened to the Supreme Court when they had the hearing a couple of weeks ago. And it was very distressing, to be honest. And I wanted you to comment, because, the idea that the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court brought forward, where he questioned whether people knew what they voted on in 1980 and in 1992. To me, that was appalling, because Roe had been passed, but people wanted to make sure that possibly they could do something in their states to make sure that if something happened, there was something to fall back on in the state. And then again in 1992, I mean, everybody knew what they were voting for. Only when it's a women's issue like this, people don't know what they're voting for. But I'd like you to comment, because I think that just the whole dialogue that day indicates the direction that these people are going. So then we turn to where do we go from there, and what can the people do? What can people do?
So certainly distressing day, sat in the courtroom that day. Certainly more than those comments that were distressing, to hear the chief judge say Roe was an abomination and that embryos should be a protected class of citizen should scare everyone tremendously. In ways that we may not even contemplate right now or get into today. But it is a scary time. And while my mentor would tell me I'm not allowed to tell or put words in the mouth of Supreme Court justices, I would say that we certainly can read tea leaves, and I'm not looking or believing that we're going to have a positive outcome. But I would say this: It is a terribly scary time for women and girls, and for everybody to just know where we are. The 15-week ban is in place. There is no exemption for rape, incest, and survivors of human trafficking. Once these, again, every Thursday, you have to all promise me, write it down, go check out the Supreme Court's website at 11 o'clock. Every Thursday, the decisions come out. We've been spared up until now. But once that ruling does come out, and it looks like they may uphold that 15-week ban, the 6-week ban will come into place. And what does that mean? That means that we will then have a 6-week ban. As the rabbi said, it's water. You don't even know you're pregnant. But there will be a 15-week exemption for rape, incest, and survivors of human trafficking. You can get those exemptions from law enforcement. There's a whole other way of getting those. But I want to make sure I say this to everyone that's listening, because it's going to get into the hope track, but also what if you have people in your life that are needing reproductive health care. And the most important thing, that there's a 30-day window. And I look at the doctor when I say this. I don't want women taking measures into their own hands, or not keeping appointments, or being afraid. There are people that are going to help you. And I say to the doctor on this call, thank you, God, for what you do every day, because I know you put your life at risk every day for women and girls doing what you do. But please, there will be a 30-day window. Keep your appointments. And then we are going to move into the hopeful thing, because as Jewish individuals, the most important thing that I teach my kids, and that my grandfather taught me, was tikkun olam, and how we rebuild once things have been destructed, right? And that is this a ballot initiative. That's what this is for us. There's nobody else here to fight for us but ourselves. And we have done incredible work in a very short amount of time, collecting ballot petitions, partly because of the people on this call right now. We have done over 800,000 petitions that have been collected.
Correct.
450,000 have been verified. We have to do 1.2 million. It's a lot of work. We're getting there. We have a lot of money to raise. We have a lot of things to do. But once that gets on the ballot, we will have another conversation about what that means and what that looks like, because we are the only ones who are here to fight for ourselves, because they are out there to take away our rights. Let's make no mistake about it. The Supreme Court is going to do that, I believe. Again, you don't know that a right is lost until you need it. And that's where some people are. And so a lot of people, I don't think, pay attention to these things different on this call amongst the 79 of us that are here right now. But you got to go out and tell 5 people. And then those 5 people got to go tell 5 more people. And you got to go, when you go get Botox, like I did, bring petitions with you. And when you get your hair colored, you got to take them with you. No matter what you're doing, you got to be taking petitions with you and getting people to sign petitions and give them petitions. And this is not, and I'll leave this on this because I know this is important to Leader Rich as well. This is not a partisan issue, by the way. This is a women's rights issue. This is a medical freedom issue. If you believe in freedom, if you truly believe in freedom and freedom to make a decision, there is nothing more fundamental than your right to decide what happens to your body. I cannot tell you how many Republicans and independents have asked for petitions, have already fought this battle. Now we're coming back. The rights that have been won by generations before us have now been lost. And it's incumbent upon me, my daughter, and all of us to get them back. Because I have 6-year-old twins, Kennedy and Hudson, boy and a girl. The day they were born, they had the same amount of rights. And today my daughter has fewer rights than her brother. And we have to do everything that we can to make sure that that's not right. And that is the foundation of who and what we are, I believe, as a people. And that's to repair everything that's been taken. And these rights have certainly been taken from us, and we're not going to stand idly by while that happens. So I hope I got that.
You got it.
Senator.
And I just want to say, you have 8 states that have passed protected abortion rights. And they were blue states, red states, large states, small states, east, west, whatever. And where the voters are. So we're in, I feel that, listen, there is a possibility that, and we'll discuss this in a little bit later on towards the end, about the question of viability and the concern that our Attorney General is bringing forward now about the words aren't clear. And I think everybody would agree here that, you know, they're pretty clear. And someone said at the beginning, I think you did, Michele, or maybe you did, Cori, about what a wonderful group of people put this language together. And it's very clear. But, you know, anything can happen. And it's up to us if it gets turned down by the justices. The fact that maybe we're going to have more than 1.2 million or 2 million people who have signed this petition, these people then will be able to go to the ballot and go to vote next November. So, I mean, we just have to not lose hope here about this, and all continue the work that we're doing. And this leads right into Cori, because we've talked a little bit about healthcare, but we now have an expert that can talk to us about some of the healthcare issues. And I'd like you to just kind of talk a little bit about, people use the words reproductive rights all the time, but what does that actually mean? If you could maybe talk about some of the terms that are thrown around sometimes, like abortion on demand, late term abortion, so that people have a clear view of what we're talking about here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And I also want to thank Senator Book for the courtesy that she extended to me at the times that I've been in Tallahassee to testify as part of a physician group against these restrictions that are being imposed on the women of Florida and their families. And she has always been a champion and courteous to us when we as physicians trying to talk to the legislature have been shut down, have been shut out of this process, have not been listened to, have not been heard when we are the medical experts. It's just been, she's just been wonderful in championing us, but of course we've not been heard. You asked what I consider to be reproductive rights. I don't think there's a better definition than from the sister song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Coalition. They have termed the coin reproductive justice and defined it as maintaining personal body autonomy, to have children or not have children, and parent the children that we have in safe and sustainable communities. And I think that's a very excellent definition. There is not a established medical body in this country, American Medical Association, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, American Emergency Physician, Family Physicians. There's just no medical group that does not see abortion as essential health care. And of course, no one should have an abortion that doesn't want to, but having an abortion is medical care, is autonomy, is reproductive justice. And unfortunately, when the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, and I am old enough to remember when Roe v. Wade was enacted, and demonstrated and fought for that, can't believe that at the end of my medical career, I'm back in the same place again. But when Roe v. Wade was struck down, the language is that the life of the mother is of no consequence. The states can, the lower courts, meaning the states, can determine, make the determinations about reproductive health without any consideration of the woman. The only thing that matters is the protecting the life of the unborn, which is such a foreign concept for most Jews, and I think most Americans. Anyway, it's just a complete violation of women as human beings. I mean, let alone women's rights. These are human rights. And Roe v. Wade was decided on the basis of privacy as a legal construct, and Florida has a very strong right to privacy statute, but I don't think it's going to protect us at all. And like Senator Book, I fear that the 15-week ban will be upheld by our state Supreme Court, which means the 6-week ban, which already passed in the last legislative session, will drop into place. And we will have a 6-week ban in Florida. The 15-week ban is bad enough, in addition to the preterm premature rupture of membrane cases that I've heard about. And every doctor has these cases they can pull out of their pocket. I've had patients who've come in who've been told they had an abnormal ultrasound, but genetic testing would take them right up against the 15-week band or over it. And so they've terminated pregnancies without knowing whether desired pregnancy, without knowing whether or not there was truly a genetic abnormality, because they couldn't be caught in this position of then being diagnosed after 15 weeks and having to travel out of state. Of course, all of these laws impact women on the lower socioeconomic scale, immigrant women, minority women, much greater already in this country. Black women have 3 to 5 times the mortality of white women. And the minute that you make abortion illegal, you're going to see a 40% rise in maternal mortality, because abortion is one of the most frequently performed and safest medical procedures out there. And once we take that away and push these women into term pregnancies, in addition to the emotional burdens and the financial burdens, we are also putting them at risk medically. And in the most restrictive states, we've seen a 40% increase in maternal mortality. And of course, more children are being born, more of them will have anomalies, and we're seeing a 20% increase in infant mortality. And that's just, all this right to life verbiage will not look at the fact that they're increasingly putting women at risk for death, and and they're endangering healthy pregnancies also. I want to answer all of your questions. Let me see if I can keep track. You wanted to know about some of these terms. Partial birth abortion is a political term. It is not a medical term. The vast majority of pregnancy terminations in this country are performed in the first trimester. I think it's something like 80%. I wrote the numbers down because I knew I was going to be asked something about this. 79.3% of abortions are at less than 9 weeks gestational age, and that's 7 weeks from conception. And 93% are less than 13 weeks by Guttmacher Institute, which keeps track of these statistics. So almost the vast majority of abortions are early in pregnancy. But I will say that late abortions are almost always associated with the most horrific individual, tragic, social, economic, or medical situations. And nobody should be inserting themselves in that decision. It's a decision between a woman, her family, her God, her doctor, and nobody else should have a part in it. And if we're going to make the procedures illegal, it is not going to make them go away. It's going to make them far more dangerous. And those of us on this call who are old enough to remember pre-Roe v. Wade days, it's listening to the broadcast the next morning of how many women died from hemorrhage and sepsis the night before from illegal abortion. And we're going to bring those days back.
What about talking a little bit about medication abortion and what's
medication
happening
abortion?
At Fritz-Stone?
Yeah, medication and abortion in Florida is also heavily regulated. The so-called TRAP laws, the targeted abortion provider restrictions, meaning that we can't use telemedicine. It must be a physician and no other health practitioner in the state of Florida. But there are some states that are using telemedicine, are being able to prescribe medication abortion. Medication abortion will work for pregnancies up to 10 weeks gestation, and some doctors are going up to 10 and a half to 11 weeks, though we start to see a higher failure rate of about 3% when we get up that far. But and more problems with bleeding and such. But medical abortion can be done safer. Was not around when Roe v. Wade was passed. Is a backdoor for women who are early enough to be able to have an abortion and can't access surgical abortion. About half of abortions in this country are performed through pills, through medical abortion, and women are equally satisfied with either choice, but it is not available to women who are more than 10 and a half or 11 weeks, as is about, or 10 weeks and 6 days is the cap for when that's medically available. I do want to point out that I don't think this is a Democratic or Republican issue. 1 in 4 women in this country have access to abortion care. In my age group, it's more like 1 in 3. And everybody loves somebody who has had an abortion. And I think if we can get it on the ballot, and I know that Kathy's going to be posting in the chat the link to be able to download the abortion petition. And it's important that we get it on the ballot, because that's going to make a huge difference to the life and safety and medical care and human rights of people in Florida. Is there anything else I didn't answer?
Pardon me? We're going to move on, but I have one last question for you, Cori, if you would.
Sure.
So, have you seen, some states are seeing doctors leaving or not coming to the state? Have you seen any indication of that here yet?
Yes. I mean, between the bans on gender affirming care and the abortion bans, already doctors are leaving the state. We have care deserts in Florida. There's not a board certified OBGYN between Gainesville and the Georgia border. Those care deserts are expanding. We also know that, I mean, there's a finite number of OBGYN slots and medical school slots, and those are going to fill, but residents are not staying in the states that they trained in if those states are the most medically restrictive. And it's not just OBGYN. Residents that are coming out of surgical specialties, emergency room specialties, medical, internal medicine, family plan, family practice, they also don't want to practice in states that are the most restrictive. And if we drop a 6-week ban, well, I think it's a foregone that it's going to happen. The question is when, and it's going to happen one Thursday at 11, when the state Supreme Court decides that they're not interfering with DeSantis's presidential run. It's going to drop into place. But we are going to see more and more physicians either ceasing to practice or leaving the state. And we're not going to see the residents taking their place. I mean, the early studies on resident education absolutely show that the numbers of residents staying in states that are the most restrictive is decreasing in all specialties, not just OBGYN. It's going to worsen everything about healthcare in Florida. Right. That's already
Who would want to stay in a place and practice in a place where you could go to jail for practicing within the scope of your Hippocratic oath?
There may be some doctors in Texas who think we have it easier, but yeah. There you can be sued for even giving a ride to a person to go to the clinic.
So Rachel, let me just ask if you, I want to go back now and get whatever questions that Katie has, but I wanted to give you an opportunity in case you wanted to respond to anything that's been addressed since you kicked us off so beautifully. Yeah.
No, thank you, Senator Rich. Just that I want to say that there are people on this call that are coming at this from all different angles. And I hope that wherever our participants, our listeners are coming at, right? Each of us is coming at this and is here for a reason. Some of us might be looking for the legal, for the what can I do, what does my teaching say, or how can I support doctors? So I just want to sort of add that being Jewish allows us to sort of access our Judaism all these different ways. And yeah, so I also put in the question, somebody asked for citations. I put about 9 of them in there for if someone says, what about this, right? So Senator Rich, you said Exodus 21. Yes, that's the primary one. And then here's a whole bunch of others if anyone needs. Thank you, Katie, needs all of the other pieces. So thank you for that, Senator.
Okay, and Lauren, let me just ask you lastly, why should people outside of the state of Florida care what's happening here? And give them some suggestions on how they might be able to help.
Well, I would say, yeah. So by the way, Florida was the place that people came to receive reproductive health care. If you're from the South, that's where you came. And I think that is an important thing for people to think about. Now, where do you go? Where do we go? We got to go to New York, Washington, Chicago, if appointments are available. I think that people need to be paying attention to the larger picture of where you sit and where you are in the world, right? Like nothing is independent of each other. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Certainly you see these crazy policies that the right put into place all over. Why should it matter? We seem to be the think tank of crazy sometimes. So the things that you see with crisis pregnancy centers and some of the other things, and I see the doctor kind of, I mean, there are so many things that the reasons why this is so important. As you so correctly pointed out, Senator Rich, as we have seen in other states, we know that the people don't support these types of extreme bans. People believe in this. So I think while people need to look at what's coming down the path, I think it also gives us hope in where we could be and where we may be and where I hope that we are come 24. You and I were talking about a ballot initiative far before the 6-week ban even came to be. Now we're in a place where we're marching towards that. I think that people need to pay attention always around them for what the implications are for them. And so I think that that's an important piece of this. Again, continue to get petitions. Have 5 in your car, have 10 in your car. If you go to a book club, bring them with you. If you are, taking your kids to soccer or baseball or cheerleading, whatever it is that you're doing, people know me as the crazy clipboard lady. I always have them with me. Sometimes people are annoyed with me. I don't care. As long as you're a volunteer, you can mail them in, you can send them in. They make it kind of hard. There are drop-off locations. We've tried to make it as easy as possible for you. We're almost there, but now is not the time to get weary. And as you see things happening all over the world, that can make us, quite frankly, all very, 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 very weary. There is that piece that you're doing your part to change the world in so many ways for so many people that don't even know who you are. And you're doing that. And so I think that is the piece and the part of why it's important to look out for all of the things that are happening all over.
Thank you. Katie?
Thank you. Yeah, we have a couple of questions that I think are good. And this is for anyone, panelists, for Senator Rich. Rabbi Silver, as you know, has brought a lawsuit against the abortion ban based on religious freedom rather than the privacy issue. Would any of you like to speak to that?
I would simply say the Supreme Court is scary now. Like I think any legal argument that can be made, I think it's important to try. I think that there are other arguments that I hope do come before the Supreme Court should this argument not happen. I was just in a chat group for people dealing with Addison's disease, which gives you irregular periods. And what if you are that one person who has an irregular period because you have an underlying health condition, you don't know you're pregnant, you want to receive an abortion, now you can't because you're past the 6-week ban. That's that's medical procedures that are discriminatory based on a health complication, a health challenge. I think there are a lot of things that are going to come. I hope that they do. This leaning court is very frustrating, very upsetting, and you heard them turn themselves. They're going to Senator Rich's question too, and I forgot to say it at the time. They're going to overturn 30 years of stare decisis to give a win to the governor. 30 years of established case law to give this win to the governor. Any argument that can be made, we need to make it. Any way that we can make it, we need to make it, because we shouldn't be silent when these things are happening. But I get angry, and it's 8:30, so I get angry.
We're gonna, if
I
everyone,
appreciate your passion so much.
Yeah.
I so appreciate it.
yes, I wanted to ask Dr. Baill, besides OB/GYN residents and the ability for reproductive care, do you feel that these abortion bans will impact doctors, physicians, and other specialties? For example, I've had some people talk to me about what they can and can't prescribe to people for things like epilepsy. Could you speak to that issue of, will it chill? Because certain medications may cause an abortion accidentally. And so there's some fear of what they can and can't do. Do you think that's a issue?
Well, I think that physicians in general are being more and more restricted, and legislation around healthcare issues are serving to get votes from the most extreme religious people in our state, the very Christian right, and it's chilling in lots and lots of ways, not just this issue of, well, I mean, I have no doubt that if they could get away with it, they would pass the laws like they have in Texas, which makes it, a doctor, like any citizen can sue any other citizen for having any involvement whatsoever in any termination of any pregnancy, because nobody's rights matters except for the unborn. And I mean, we're talking about up to 12 weeks, something that's a quarter, a third, a half an inch in size, like water. As we said, as the rabbi so well said it, as our ancestors have so well said it. So, I mean, I think we should all be frightened by what's happening to medicine. I think we should all be frightened. I cannot tell you what it has meant to see women who have had a previous blood clot in a previous pregnancy that went to their lung that almost killed them, that turn up to have had, half the people who come into abortion clinics already have families. The vast majority were contracepting in some form within the 6 months, of time when they got pregnant. And a woman like that pops up in your clinic, that she's driven an hour and a half in a car pregnant. I mean, it's just such a setup for a blood clot. And yet you can't take care of her that day. You have to send her home to drive another, 3 hours away, come back in 24 hours to drive 3 hours back. You're endangering her life, but it doesn't matter. Our Supreme Court decided that the life of the mother is of no consequence. It doesn't weigh in the decision at all. That is the language of the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. And if that isn't chilling to all of us, doctor or not, I don't know what is. But I mean, doctors have had their rights to practice chipped away at. I mean, the 24-hour wait period, the parental consent, the restriction of no telemedicine, that we can't train a nurse practitioner to I mean, medical abortion. I literally stand in the room and say, if you're sure of your decision, there's a pill for you to take there. Okay. Bye. I mean, I explain everything. I talk to the patient, but there's no reason that that any well-trained medical professional could do that. Any nurse practitioner, any physician assistant, any registered nurse could do it. I mean, it's just not that complicated. And it's a very safe procedure. We're not endangering anyone. And yet, we're talking about crisis pregnancy centers. I'm like Senator Book, you've got me started now. The crisis pregnancy centers, for those of you who don't know, these are fake clinics. They have no medical supervision. They have no medical regulation. And yet they're saying free ultrasounds. They do, some housewife does the ultrasound, doesn't have to answer to anyone, tells a woman, oh, look at the baby. You don't want to murder your baby. Women don't know that's what they're coming into. They don't know they're going to have their arm twisted. These already have funding by the state. And when the 6-week ban drops into place, $50 million to fake pregnancy clinics who have no regulation, where in in a medically regulated abortion clinic with healthcare professionals. We have the ACCA, the regulatory board, in there every freaking week going through our charts, disrupting our patient care, tying up our administrators, trying to find a way to fine us, to make it more expensive, to make it more difficult to give what is essential health care to women.
You know what?
Unfortunately,
Go ahead, Senator.
unfortunately, the crisis pregnancy centers was one of the few things that we could not stop when I was in the legislature. It was during the Charlie Crist administration, and funding was dramatically increased for it. And all the signs and billboards were up along the turnpike and I-95, and nothing has changed. We have not been able to get rid of them. And, it's sad to say.
They're a travesty. They're a travesty.
We are we're running long, but I know this is just such an important issue. So I really appreciate everyone staying. I want to ask one last question that someone brought up and sent to us, which I think is a great way to close. How can we bring more people? And this question from one of the participants said, how can we bring more men, our brothers, our spouses, our friends to the front lines? How do we get more votes, and how do we get more people passionate about this? And that's open to everyone.
Okay, who wants to take a first crack? Rabbi Jackson, I see you smiling there.
Yeah, I think the first way to look at this is it's not a woman's issue.
Correct.
This is it's a human issue. It's a family issue. It is right that I don't want to use scare tactics. I want to stay away from your wife will die if you don't. I think you're like, no, use those. Right. It's that we all need women in our society, right? Our society, we have to have it. And we have to have people who have uteruses to continue to populate the earth. And if we do not have safe health care for all, then our entire society will collapse, right? It's not, so it's really a question. It's not saying it's a woman's issue. And so for me, when I looked at some of these questions, I said, this isn't a woman thing. It can't be a woman thing. And for some people who say, oh, it's only for those with uteruses, say, okay, well, also, if we can go this far in these ways, we're not going to stop. We're not. Why do you think that this is the line? Where do you think that this is actually going to go? Let's play this out past women. Let's play this out past a fetus and see what's going to happen. Maybe that will give you some action and impetus to step in where you need to step in.
Cori?
Everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. I have been very gratified to be at events where I've seen, young Black men, Hispanic men, everybody out there with those clipboards trying to get signatures. I think young people, thank God, do not see this as just a women's issue. I hand out the petition at the abortion clinic, and I always give an extra to take home. There are a lot of supportive, loving, wonderful men out there who have their heads screwed on right. And I don't mean right wing. And this is absolutely a human rights issue. And it's not just a medical issue, but
I would
and the polling shows it. The polling all shows that young people, men and women, are supportive of abortion rights. It's very different from, years ago. I think about all the years, 50 years or more of working in this area and still having to deal with the same issues. But we never had the kind of support that we have now from young people. And these are the people we're trying to get out to the polls to vote on lots of issues. So I think that they're a big key to this. And I think, like I said, I think we just have to keep fighting, going as far as we can with this. you know, Attorney General Ashley Moody has telegraphed what she's doing with the viability issue. We have that in statute. There's no misunderstanding of what viability is. It is the cornerstone of Roe. So, you know, we know what they're going to be doing, but we just have to keep engaging and getting people to support this initiative. And if something happens and it's not this initiative, we have them there ready to vote, and make sure that they're registered to vote. Right. This is really the most important thing. All these young people, we keep talking about them, how they feel the right way about all of these issues. They grew up in much more diverse communities than many of us did. You know, they have friends of all races, religions, ethnicities, and it's a different world. And we just have to engage that world in what we're doing.
I'd go to the last thing that my grandfather always said to me, and it's something that the rabbi and everyone has sort of spoken to, but my grandfather you didn't speak up because I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist, because I wasn't a trade unionist, and they came for you. They came for you, and there was no one left to stand for you. And I think that is a cornerstone again of who and what we are as a people. How do you get everyone involved? Remind them. This does not end at each and every one of us. If you don't think that they're coming for the LGBTQ, they already have. If you don't think that they have come for African American rights, they already have come. If they're coming, they're coming. They're coming for each and every group. Anything that's smaller or less than somebody else, they're coming. And it is all of our responsibilities to speak up when you see injustice anywhere. And I think that is a piece and a part of who and what we are as a people. So I think that's how you also, it's not just about a woman's right to choose. This is about so much more than that. I go back to, it's freedom. They talk a big game about freedom. They talk a big game about don't put on a mask. You all are free to make decisions. Well, I don't know about you, but they've taken away my rights to make certain decisions that come to my reproductive health care. So I think that's really where, again, we remind people, this is not just about a woman's right to choose. This is about true freedom and healthcare, and you are only free as those that are most oppressed among us. And I don't know about any one of you, but there is nothing more fundamental than a woman's right to decide what happens to her body.
Guys,
Well said,
I
Senator.
am going to
Well
have
said.
to pull this to a close because we're about 15 minutes late. But this has been just an absolutely amazing and very impactful discussion. And I want to thank you to our fabulous moderator, State Senator Nan Rich. Apologies for the tech difficulties. And thank you to our panelists, State Senator Lauren Book, Dr. Cori Baill, Rabbi Rachael Jackson, Michele Eiger for introducing us. I want to say this webinar is part of a longer multi-year project, Jewish Women and Religious Freedom in Florida. Our next event in this project is going to be December 3rd in person at Temple Beth Emet in Cooper City, Florida. Our speakers are going to include Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, retired Florida Supreme Court Justice Barbara Parente, State Senator Nan Rich again, who we know is already fabulous. So we will be getting out information to everyone very soon about that. Mark your calendars, December 3rd. We also want to thank again Herizon for their grant support for this project and letting us do this important work. Good night, everyone, and thank you all.
Thank you for the many kind comments in the chat. It was a pleasure being on the panel.